Guess Eleanor never really loved you. My father said it like it was nothing, like he was commenting on the weather, not standing beside his mother's open casket. The room heard him, every single person. No one reacted. Not a gasp, not a glance, just silence, thick and deliberate, like they all agreed. I stood there in my only black suit, hands still, eyes fixed on the polished edge of the coffin. I didn't look at him, didn't give him anything. That's what I'd learned over the years. You don't respond. You remember, my father, Richard Tate, gave a faint smile as he adjusted his cufflinks, already turning back to the guests offering their rehearsed condolences. To them, it was just another moment. To me, it was a line drawn, because 3 weeks later, I would stand on a sidewalk and watch that same man lose everything he thought was his. But that comes later. 3 weeks later, I stood across the street from the house on Hawthorne Ridge and watched my father carry his life out in cardboard boxes. The place looked the same as it always had. 3 stories, white stone, iron gates, the kind of house people slowed down to look at. But that morning, it wasn't a home, it was a scene. A sheriff's deputy stood near the front steps, arms crossed, posture relaxed but final. No urgency, no sympathy, just procedure, the kind that doesn't ask questions. My father moved slower than I remembered, not because he had to, but because there was nowhere left to rush to. Each box he carried looked heavier than it should have been, not in weight, in meaning. Furniture followed, paintings. A lifetime reduced to inventory. No one helped him, no one stood beside him. Not Victoria, not Logan, not a single person who had filled that house 3 weeks earlier, raising glasses and pretending grief. I stayed where I was, hands in my coat pockets, silent. He hadn't seen me yet. Didn't matter. This wasn't about confrontation. This was about watching the truth settle in, because Eleanor Cole hadn't forgotten me. She had rewritten everything, every document, every transfer, every assumption my father had built his life on. What he thought he owned, what he thought he controlled, had never been his to begin with, and this time there was proof. I exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the front door as another box disappeared behind it. 3 weeks. That's all it took for everything to collapse. My name is Ian Tate. I'm 29 years old, and I teach 8th grade English at a public school just outside Boston. It's not the kind of job my family ever respected. I make about $3,800 a month, enough to cover rent, groceries, student loans, and not much else. No investments, no backup plan, just routine. My apartment is a 1-bedroom in a building that always smells faintly like old paint and laundry detergent. The furniture doesn't match. Most of it came from clearance sales or secondhand listings. I put everything together myself. No one else was coming. There's a small table by the window where I grade papers at night, stacks of essays, half-finished lesson plans, red ink bleeding through cheap paper. It's quiet work, predictable. I don't mind that. My students are 13, loud, unfocused, honest in a way adults forget how to be. Some of them look at me like I actually matter, like what I say sticks. That's enough. The morning of Eleanor's funeral, I stood in front of my closet longer than I needed to. There wasn't much to choose from. I pulled out the only black suit I owned. Bought it 4 years ago for a colleague's service. It still fit, barely. The fabric had worn thin at the sleeves. The color wasn't as deep as it used to be. It would have to do. I checked my bank account the night before. Buying something new wasn't an option, not without pushing something else back. Rent, loans, food. So I adjusted what I had, pressed the jacket, cleaned the shoes, kept it simple. On my dresser sat the only thing I still had from my mother, a silver watch she gave me when I turned 18. The face was scratched. The band had been repaired twice. I fastened it around my wrist without thinking. In the mirror, I looked functional. Not impressive, not broken, just someone who had learned how to operate with less. On the nightstand, there was a photograph, Eleanor and me. I was 8, flower on both our hands, her kitchen behind us. She was laughing. I wasn't looking at the camera. I was looking at her. I picked it up for a second, then set it back down. I'll be there, I said quietly. At the time, I thought that was goodbye. I didn't know it was the beginning of everything that would come after. I was 8 when my mother died. Cancer, the slow kind. The kind that doesn't take all at once, it strips things away, piece by piece, until there's nothing left to hold on to. I remember the hospital more than anything else. The constant beeping, the sterile smell, the way the room felt too quiet even when machines were making noise. Her hand in mine lighter every time I held it. I didn't understand it then, not fully. I just knew something was leaving, and no one was saying it out loud. At the funeral, people spoke in low voices, logistics, arrangements. What came next? Only one person looked at me like I was still there. Eleanor. She didn't say much. She just sat beside me and kept her hand on my shoulder the entire time. Steady, present. Everyone else was already moving forward. After that, things changed. Not all at once. Nothing obvious. Just gradual. My father stopped asking questions. Then he stopped listening to answers. Conversations turned into instructions, then into silence. The first time he said it, I didn't react. You're just like her. It wasn't a compliment. I understood that part. Then came the comparisons. Your mother was weak. Don't make the same mistake. I stopped responding after a while. It didn't change anything. Victoria Cole. My aunt picked up where he left off. Every family gathering followed the same pattern. She'd look at me, then at her son, Logan, 2 years older, sharper, louder, already being positioned for something bigger. Why can't you be more like him? It wasn't really a question. I learned early that the right answer didn't exist. So I stopped trying to give one. You adjust instead. Speak less. Stay out of the way. Don't give them anything to use. That was the rule. Logan didn't hide it. The smirks, the comments just loud enough to be heard. I didn't push back. Not because I couldn't. Because it wouldn't matter. Nothing did. Except one place. Eleanor's house. Every summer. I went there. No arguments. No comparisons. No corrections. Just space. She taught me how to work with my hands. Bread dough, mostly. Said it told you a lot about a person, how patient they were, how much pressure they used, whether they rushed things that shouldn't be rushed. We didn't talk about my father. We didn't need to. One afternoon, when I was 15, she said something I didn't understand at the time. Everything I have for you is safe. Ian. She didn't smile when she said it. She just looked at me like she needed me to remember. I nodded, didn't ask questions. I should have, because that was the first time she told me the truth. I just didn't know it yet. Eleanor's house was the only place that ever felt consistent. Same street, same white stone exterior, same quiet inside that didn't feel empty. It felt held together, like nothing in it existed by accident. Every summer. I stayed there for 2 months. No one questioned it, probably because it made things easier for them, for me. It was the only time I didn't have to think about where I stood. Mornings started early, not by alarm. By routine. She'd already be in the kitchen by the time I came downstairs. Coffee on, windows open, light coming in at an angle that made everything look slower than it was. There was always something on the counter. Flour, eggs. A bowl already set out like she knew exactly when I'd walk in. You're late, she'd say without looking up. I never was. I'd take my place across from her, roll up my sleeves, and get to work. She didn't explain things the way most people do. No step-by-step instructions. No corrections unless something actually mattered. You'll figure it out, she'd say, and I did, kneading dough, measuring without measuring, learning when something was ready, just by how it felt under your hands. It wasn't really about baking. It was about control, patience, knowing when to apply pressure and when to step back. We didn't fill the space with unnecessary conversation. Most of the time, it was quiet, but it wasn't the kind of quiet I had at home. This one didn't weigh anything. Sometimes she'd tell stories, not about the family, never about them. About how she built the first bakery with one oven and no investors. About sleeping in the back room because she couldn't afford anything else. About mistakes she didn't repeat. She never softened the details. You don't survive by hoping people treat you fairly, she told me once. You survive by knowing exactly what's yours and protecting it. I remembered that. Afternoons were slower. We'd sit outside, tea, sometimes nothing at all. She didn't ask about school much, didn't ask about my father. She already knew. One day, when I was 17, I asked her why she never said anything to them, why she let it keep happening. She didn't answer right away, just looked out toward the yard, hands folded in her lap. Because timing matters, she said eventually. I didn't understand what that meant, not then. That same summer, a few weeks before I left, she said it again. Different tone this time. Everything I have for you is safe. Ian, I looked at her, waiting for more. There wasn't any. No explanation. No context. Just that same steady look, like she was placing something in front of me I wasn't ready to carry yet. I nodded once. Didn't ask. Didn't push. That was how things worked with her. She gave you exactly what you needed, just not always when you expected it. After the service, we gathered in Eleanor's study for the reading of the will. It had always been my favorite room in the house. Dark oak walls, floor-to-ceiling shelves, books arranged with a kind of precision that didn't need to be explained. Her desk sat near the window, untouched, like it had been waiting for her to come back and finish something. She never would. Around 20 people filled the room. Close family, business associates. The ones who mattered when there was something to gain. No one spoke much. They didn't need to. Everyone was there for the same reason. I took a seat near the edge of the room, close to the window, far enough from my father. Far enough from Victoria and Logan, not far enough to disappear at the front. Oliver Kent adjusted his glasses and set a leather folder down on the desk. Everything about him was deliberate, measured, like he had rehearsed this moment. He cleared his throat. The last will and testament of Eleanor Cole, dated March 12th of this year, March, 3 months before she died. He began reading, formal language, structured, clean. I, Eleanor Cole, being of sound mind and body. The room went still. Even the clock on the wall seemed louder. To my son-in-law, Richard Tate. I leave the family residence located at 18 Hawthorne Ridge, along with all associated real property. My father didn't react immediately, just a small shift in posture, a controlled inhale, like confirmation. To my daughter, Victoria Cole and Richard Tate, I leave my shares in Cole Artisan Holdings, to be divided equally, with a portion allocated to the company's charitable foundation. Victoria's fingers moved instinctively to the bracelet on her wrist, subtle, practiced. Logan leaned back slightly, arms crossed, already satisfied. Oliver turned the page, then he stopped, closed the folder. That concludes the will. No hesitation, no correction, nothing missing except one thing, my name. It hadn't been said once. The silence that followed was short, a few seconds, maybe, but it stretched. I stayed where I was, hands resting on my knees. No movement. Processing wasn't the right word. There was nothing to process. It was clear. She had left me nothing, not an item, not a mention, not even acknowledgement, across the room. I felt it before I saw it. My father turning toward me. When I looked up, he was already watching. Then he smiled. Not warm, not subtle. Satisfied. Well, he said, just loud enough for everyone to hear. I guess she never really cared about you after all. A pause. Then someone behind him let out a quiet laugh. Another followed. It spread through the room. Not loud, not aggressive, just casual. Like it didn't matter. Victoria adjusted her posture. Voice smooth, controlled. At least now, things are clear. Logan didn't bother lowering his voice. Probably for the best. What would he even do with any of it? More laughter. Not one person interrupted. Not one person told them to stop. Some looked uncomfortable. Most didn't. I felt it rise for a second. The instinct to respond, to say something, to break it. I didn't. There was nothing to gain. I stood, slow, controlled, smoothed the front of my jacket, nodded once, not agreement, understanding. That was the moment everything shifted. Not for them, for me. I turned and walked out of the study. Didn't rush, didn't look back. The sound of my shoes against the floor stayed steady as I moved through the hallway, past the foyer, under the chandelier that had been there longer than I'd been alive. Everything around me looked permanent, untouchable. It wasn't. Behind me, Victoria's voice carried just enough to reach. Just like his mother, she said quietly. No backbone. I didn't stop. Didn't respond. The front door opened. Cool air hit my face as I stepped outside. The driveway was lined with cars that cost more than anything I owned. I walked past them without slowing down. 2 blocks to the bus stop. That was my plan. That was always the plan. I just didn't know yet how wrong everything in that room had been. I made it halfway down the driveway before I slowed. Not because I needed to, because there was nowhere to go fast. The house behind me stayed quiet. No one followed. No one called my name. That part didn't surprise me. It confirmed it. I kept walking. Past the gate, past the line of cars, onto the sidewalk where everything felt smaller, less controlled. The air had that late October edge to it. Cold enough to notice, not enough to stop you. I adjusted my jacket and kept moving. 2 blocks to the bus stop. I counted the steps without thinking. Habit. Something to focus on. Something that wasn't the room I had just walked out of. The words replayed anyway. Not hers, theirs. I guess she never really cared about you. Simple, clean, final. I didn't argue with it. Didn't try to correct it. Because in that moment, it made sense. If she had cared, my name would have been there. That was the logic. Direct. Hard to ignore. I reached the corner and stopped. The bus wasn't there yet. Of course it wasn't. I checked the time. 15 minutes. I leaned back against the metal pole, hands in my pockets, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. Cars passed. People moved. Normal things. None of it registered. For 20 years, I had held on to something without saying it out loud. That she saw me. That she knew. That somewhere, outside of everything else, I mattered. Not to everyone, just to one person. And now, that was gone. Or it had never been there to begin with. I exhaled slowly, did the math without meaning to. 20 years, every summer, every conversation, every moment in that kitchen, all of it meant something to me. Maybe not to her. That part settled in quietly. No sharp break, no collapse, just wait. I didn't move when the bus finally pulled up. The driver opened the door, looked at me for a second. "You getting on?" I nodded once, stepped inside, took a seat near the back. Same route, same view. The city changed as we moved. Clean lines turned into worn ones, glass into brick, silence into noise, familiar. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. Didn't sleep, just sat there. By the time I got back to my apartment, it was already getting dark. I didn't turn on the lights, didn't take off the jacket, just stood there for a minute, letting the quiet settle in. No calls, no messages, nothing waiting. That made it easier. I walked to the table, sat down, and stared at the surface without really seeing it. If she hadn't cared, then everything I thought I knew was wrong. And if that was true, then there was nothing left to hold on to. I stayed there longer than I should have. Didn't move, didn't think about what came next. Because there wasn't a next. Not yet, just silence. 3 weeks passed. I went back to work. Same classroom, same routine. Fractions, essay structure. Kids asking questions that didn't have anything to do with the lesson. I answered them anyway. It kept things simple. At night, I graded papers, red pen, quiet apartment, no interruptions. I didn't think about the will during the day. At night, it came back, not loud, just consistent, like something unfinished. On my table, there was a stack of envelopes, Eleanor's handwriting, blue ink, same as always, birthdays, holidays, small notes that had made it through when nothing else had. I opened one, read the same line I'd seen before. "Everything I have for you is safe." I stared at it longer than I should have, tried to make it mean something else. It didn't. By the 3rd week, I had almost accepted it. Almost. That Saturday. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I never was. I walked over, opened the door. The man standing there didn't introduce himself immediately. Late 60s, gray hair, straight posture, the kind of presence that doesn't need to explain itself. He held a leather briefcase in one hand. "Mr. Tate," he said, voice controlled, precise. I nodded. "My name is Jonathan Reed. I represented Eleanor Cole for the last 30 years. I didn't respond. He studied me for a second. "May I come in?" I stepped aside. He entered without hesitation. Took in the apartment with a single glance. No reaction. Sat when I offered the chair. Placed the briefcase on the table. Opened it. Inside was an envelope, thick, sealed with red wax. A crest pressed into it. My name, written across the front, in her handwriting, for Ian Tate, to be opened only in the presence of Mr. Reed. My pulse picked up. "That doesn't make sense," I said. "The family lawyer represents your father," Reed said, cutting in calmly. "Not your grandmother." A pause. "She hired me long before that." I picked up the envelope. The wax was firm, cold. It took more force than I expected to break it. Inside a document, legal language, dense, structured, but the title stood out immediately. "Last Will and Testament of Eleanor Cole." Date, January 15th, 2 months before the version that had been read in that room. Reed leaned forward slightly. "This will was executed in my office in Milwaukee," he said. "Independent notary, 2 witnesses, both with no connection to your father or aunt." I kept reading, then I stopped. Read the line again, then again. "To my grandson, Ian Tate, I leave the entirety of my estate, everything, the house, the company, all financial accounts, 8 figures." My breathing slowed, not faster, controlled. "To my daughter, Victoria Cole, and my son-in-law, Richard Tate, I leave nothing." The room went quiet, not because it changed, because something shifted inside me. The document read at the funeral. Reed continued. "Was signed in March. At that time, your grandmother was hospitalized." He didn't rush the next part. "Under sedation." I looked up. "What are you saying I'm saying?" He replied. "That her capacity to give informed consent is highly questionable." A pause. "And that your father knew it." He reached into the briefcase again, pulled out a second envelope, unsealed, worn edges. "She wrote this over several months." He placed it in front of me. "It explains everything." I opened it. 8 pages. Her handwriting, clean, familiar. I read the first line. Ian. Not formal, not distant. Just my name. My chest tightened. "For the past 20 years, I have been sending you money, $650 each month. It was meant to go into an account under your name. I didn't move. The total now exceeds $150,000. You never received any of it." I stopped breathing for a second. "Your father changed the account information. He has taken every transfer, 20 years, every month. Gone." I kept reading. "I discovered this 3 years ago. By then, they had already begun isolating me, controlling my calls, monitoring my visitors." The words stayed steady, measured, like she had written them knowing exactly how they would land. They were waiting for me to die, so they could take everything. My grip tightened on the page. But they underestimated me. That line, I read it twice. I have documented everything, every transaction, every communication. She didn't sound afraid. She sounded prepared. Reed placed another document beside me, to be read at the next family gathering. I glanced at it, structured, precise, evidence listed in order, dates, accounts, email records, witness statements, all of it, numbered, verified. She planned this, I said. 3 years, Reed replied. Quietly, I leaned back, looked at everything spread across the table. The will, the letter, the evidence. It wasn't chaos, it was a system. She hadn't reacted. She had built something. The gathering, Reed said, is in 2 weeks. I didn't ask how he knew. He'll call it, he added. It's tradition. A pause. Are you going to be there? I pictured the room. My father, Victoria, Logan. The same faces, same expectations, different outcome. I didn't hesitate. I'll be there. Reed nodded once, like he expected that answer. Nothing else needed to be said. For the first time in 3 weeks, something made sense. The house looked the same. It always did. Same stone steps, same iron gate, same quiet confidence built into the structure, like it had never needed to prove anything to anyone. But this time, it felt different. Not because it had changed, because I had. Jonathan Reed stood beside me as we walked up the driveway. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Everything that mattered was already in the folder he carried. The front door was open. Voices drifted out. Laughter. Glasses. The low hum of people who believed the outcome had already been decided. We stepped inside. Around 40 people filled the foyer and main hall. Family, business associates, the same circle that had stood in that study 3 weeks ago. Only now, they looked more relaxed, more certain. This wasn't mourning, this was expectation. At the center of it stood my father, Richard Tate, speaking with Oliver Kent. When he saw me, the shift was immediate, small, controlled. But there, surprise first, then irritation, then something else. He didn't recognize it yet, but I did. Victoria turned a moment later. Her bracelet caught the light as her hand stopped mid-gesture. Logan noticed next. His expression didn't change. Still the same smirk. Still the same assumption, Ian, he said, stepping forward. Arms crossed? I thought that was made clear. This isn't your place. A few people nearby turned to watch. I didn't answer him. Didn't need to. My father closed the distance instead. I told you to stay away, he said, voice low, controlled. You made a threat. I replied. That's not the same thing. A pause. It landed. He hadn't heard me speak like that before. Not once. Victoria stepped in smoothly. Ian, she said, softer tone, measured. This isn't the time. We can discuss whatever you think this is privately. No, Reed said. Just one word. Enough. He stepped forward beside me and placed the folder on the table in the center of the room. Mr. Tate has every right to be here, he said calmly. And more importantly, there are matters that require immediate clarification. The room shifted. Subtle, but real. Reed opened the folder. This, he said, voice carrying without effort, is the last will and testament of Eleanor Cole, executed January 15th of this year. A ripple moved through the room. I watched Oliver Kent. His posture changed first, then his face, color draining. This will, Reed continued, was executed in my office under independent supervision. 2 witnesses were present. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Helen Brooks, Arthur Collins. 2 figures stepped forward from the back. Older, steady, recognized. People who had been there long before anyone else in that room. She was of sound mind, Helen said. No hesitation, completely. Arthur nodded once. I watched her read every page. Silence. Complete now. Reed turned a page. According to this will, the entirety of Eleanor Cole's estate is transferred to Ian Tate. No reaction. Not immediately. Like the room needed a second to understand what had just been said. Then it hit. What Logan said, too quickly. That's not possible, Victoria added. Voice tightening. My father didn't speak. He just stared. Reed continued. The residence, full ownership of Cole Artisan Holdings. All financial accounts. He closed the document. Everything. The silence didn't break. It fractured. Small movements first. People shifting. Glances exchanged. Distance forming. This is invalid. My father said finally. The will was signed in March. Under sedation. Reed replied. Flat, direct. We have medical records indicating compromised capacity. My father turned to Oliver. Say something. Oliver didn't. Didn't move. Didn't look at him. That told everyone what they needed to know. Victoria's composure cracked next. You can't just walk in here, and we're not here to argue, Reed said. We're here to present. He nodded once toward me. That was it. My turn. I stepped forward. No rush, no hesitation. The letter was already in my hand. This, I said, was written by Eleanor Cole in the final year of her life. My voice stayed level. She asked that it be read at that gathering. I unfolded it, didn't look at anyone, just the page. To those I once called family. The room held still. If Ian is reading this, then I am gone, and you have done exactly what I expected. A shift, subtle, but sharp. You removed him from my will, and told him I did not care for him. I paused. Let it sit. Let me be clear. I cared for Ian more than anyone in this family. No one moved. For 20 years, I sent him $650 each month. Funds intended for an account under his name. My grip on the page tightened slightly. He never received them. I looked up, just once, at my father, then back to the page. His father altered the account information and redirected every transfer. A sound broke somewhere in the room. Not loud enough. The total exceeds $150,000. That's a lie, my father snapped. Let him finish, Helen said, sharp. Final, I continued. I have documented every transaction, bank records, correspondence. I reached into the folder and pulled out a printed page. August 3rd, 2018. I held it up. Don't worry, he changed the account years ago. He never sees any of it. I didn't need to say who wrote it. Everyone already knew. Reed moved through the room, placing copies into hands. No one refused them. Victoria stared at the page. Her own words. In print. Verified. That's out of context, she said. There are 47 more, I replied. Calm. No emphasis. That was enough. I returned to the letter. In March, while I was hospitalized and under sedation, a second will was presented to me. The words stayed steady. I was not capable of informed consent. No one interrupted this time. They guided my hand. That line landed differently, heavier. I have included witness testimony and medical records. Reed placed the documents on the table. No one touched them. Not yet. My father moved forward. Fast. This is fabricated. All of it. Careful, Arthur said, stepping in. Not aggressive, just present. There are witnesses here. My father stopped. Not by choice, by reality. I lowered the letter, looked at him directly. You said she didn't care. I said, quiet. You said it, in front of everyone. He didn't answer, didn't deny it, didn't need to. You were wrong. That was it. No anger, no volume, just fact. Reed stepped forward again. For clarity, he said, legal proceedings have already been initiated regarding financial misappropriation. He let that sit. The estimated liability exceeds $200,000. No reaction from my father this time, just stillness. Around him, people moved. Not dramatically, just enough. Stepping back, creating space, distance. Logan was the first to look away. Victoria didn't speak again. Oliver turned and left the room without a word. That was the moment it ended. Not when the documents were presented, not when the letter was read. When no one stood with him. I walked over, stopped in front of my father. For the first time he looked smaller, not physically, something else. You don't need to explain anything, I said. I already know. He opened his mouth, closed it. Nothing came out. That's enough. I stepped back, looked around the room. 40 people, all watching, not one interrupting, not one laughing. That part was over. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and that was it. Nothing left to say. 3 months later, my life didn't look anything like it used to. Not because I stayed in that house. I didn't. The property on Hawthorne Ridge sold within 6 weeks. Too big, too heavy, too much history tied to people I had no intention of carrying forward. 42 rooms, all of it gone, clean. Final, I bought something smaller. 10 minutes from the school. 3 bedrooms, 1 floor, a backyard just big enough for a garden, and a table that actually got used. The kitchen mattered more than anything else. Open space, natural light, room to work, room to breathe. For the first time, nothing in the house felt temporary. I kept teaching. That part didn't change. Same classroom, same 23 students, same noise, same questions that had nothing to do with the lesson. But something shifted, not in them, in me. I didn't second guess as much, didn't over-explain, didn't try to prove anything. I just showed up. Consistent. That was enough. The money gave me options. It didn't change what mattered. What I did build was something else. I called it Eleanor's Standard, a scholarship fund for kids who lost a parent too early. Not just tuition, practical things, winter coats, books, field trips, quiet gaps no one talks about, the kind of support that doesn't draw attention, but changes outcomes. We started small, 10 students, then 20. By the end of the second year, it covered 3 districts. No press, no announcements, just work. Maria came by every Sunday. Same as before, she'd bring ingredients. I'd clear the counter. We didn't need to talk much. Flour, dough, oven heat, apple pies. Mostly, Eleanor's recipe, measured by feel, not numbers. You're doing it right, Maria said once, watching me work. I didn't ask what she meant, I knew. The legal side ended the way Reed said it would. Fast, no trial, no drawn-out process. The evidence didn't leave room for it. My father and Victoria settled, just over $200,000. Everything they took. Interest, legal costs. It wasn't about the number, it was about the record. Permanent, documented, finished. His business collapsed within 6 months, without Eleanor's assets behind it. The structure didn't hold. It had never been built to stand on its own. Last I heard, he was renting a place outside Worcester. Smaller, quieter, no one asking questions. Victoria didn't recover either. Her husband filed for divorce a few weeks after the gathering. He hadn't known. That mattered. Logan lost his position when the company was restructured. For the first time, he had to start from the bottom. No introductions, no shortcuts, just work. Oliver Kent's license was suspended pending investigation. His name stopped carrying weight. That was enough. I didn't follow any of it closely, didn't need updates, didn't check in. Once things were settled, I stepped out completely. A year later, I went back to the cemetery. Same time of year, October, cold air, dry leaves, quiet. I brought white roses. And something else, a small container, still warm, apple pie. I found her headstone easily, simple, no excess. Eleanor Grace Cole, 1941-2023. She built what lasted. I chose the words myself. I sat down beside it, didn't rush, didn't plan what to say. I handled it, I said after a while. No emotion in it, just fact. They heard it. The wind moved through the trees, steady. I rested my hand against the stone, cold, solid, for a long time. I thought you left me out, I said, that I didn't matter enough. A pause. That part was wrong. I looked out across the rows. Quiet. Ordered. I understand now. Not everything. Just enough. You weren't waiting. You were preparing. That was the difference. She hadn't reacted. She had built something that would hold when she wasn't there. I stayed a little longer. Didn't check the time. Didn't need to. Thank you, I said. Simple. Then I stood, placed the pie beside the flowers, and left. Didn't look back. That chapter was done. If there's one thing I took from all of it, it's this. People will tell you who you are. They'll do it casually, repeatedly, sometimes in rooms full of witnesses who choose not to say anything. That doesn't make it true. Silence isn't agreement. Most of the time, it's convenience, or fear, or weakness. None of that defines you. What does is what you do when no one is watching. How you move when you're not being measured. What you build when there's no guarantee anyone will see it. You don't need to argue your value. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You need to know what's yours. And when the time comes, you stand, you present it, and you let it speak. If they still don't see it, you leave. Not because you lost, because you understand something they don't. Your life was never meant to be built inside their approval. If this story stayed with you, not just on the surface, but somewhere quieter, take a second. Drop where you're listening from, what time it is, or just say which part felt familiar. Sometimes that's enough. If it meant something, hit like, so it reaches someone else who needs it. And if you want more stories like this, stay. This story is a work of fiction, inspired by common family conflict themes. A resemblance to real persons or events is purely coincidental.